all. Bills can win it here. White puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good. And the Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. They win it 41-38. Incredible. What a comeback by the Bills.
Jacksonville's perfect record on the line right here.
They put in Williams as the fullback, and he scores a touchdown, the 12th year defensive tackle.
And the fans are all over the field. Incredible. This place is pandemonium.
Welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am Anthony. I'm your host here on Disguised Coverage. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter, or if follows aren't your thing, I'll gladly take the key to your personal vault at Gringotts. Either one of those things are just fine with me. Whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, view this podcast, whatever have you, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. I know it may seem small, but it's tremendously important. And also while you're there, check out all the other great content that Cover One has to offer. You got the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg and Aaron. You've got the Hoof Live with Sterling Furrow, Anthony Romeo, and Eric B. There's draft coverage. There's so much that Cover One has to offer in terms of the Buffalo Bills and NFL content in general. We've got you covered pretty much every single day of the week. Rate and review and subscribe to all of those things. It means a lot. And thank you very much for joining me here on this episode, where we're going to be going through the Buffalo Bills offseason priorities list, as we are now officially into the start of the offseason in terms of the Super Bowl being done and free agency coming up underway soon and the draft coming up after that. We are in the stretch that will do a lot of determining in terms of what the Bills will look like come 2021. And we know how the season ended. We know how we lost in Kansas City. We know how it was less than ideal. We know what it looked like. We know how we felt. We know the optics of it. But I think a key thing to remember going through this offseason is that the Bills are still a very good football team. And there's a lot of hope for the future. There's a lot of promise for the future. Do not use one game or let one game throw you completely off track and make you think, okay, everything has to be changed. Everything has to be revamped. I think there are certain areas in which we are deficient. And I think we have to compare ourselves to the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been the AFC representative in the Super Bowl for the last 2 years. And if the Bills want to get to the Super Bowl, they have to be able to contend with the Kansas City Chiefs. They have to be able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And in order to do that, again, the Bills are a good football team right now. But in order to contend with the Chiefs and get to the Super Bowl and win a championship, the Bills have to do a couple of things. They have to tweak some things, but there's no major overhauls that are needed. We're not completely revamping or reshaping one side of the ball or one particular grouping. And I think that's a very encouraging thing as a whole for this offseason, to know that we don't come in with, oh my God, this is a huge glaring hole, or this is a huge need, or if we don't upgrade this position, we're done. There are strengths that this team has that allows them to cover up for and mitigate some of the deficiencies and vulnerabilities they have. But if we can address some of those deficiencies and vulnerabilities, we'll be a better team for it in 2021. Of course, everything in this offseason starts and ends with the salary cap. Myself and Greg Thompson of the Cover One Buffalo podcast did a Buffalo Bills salary cap special last week. If you haven't checked that out, please go check that out. It is also tremendously informative in terms of what you need to know for the Buffalo Bills salary cap, the salary cap as a whole, how much money we have, players we have under contract, how we can create some more salary cap room, some financial flexibility, all those things. Greg and I took a massive deep dive into that last week. Check that out. And that's the first domino, the first piece in setting the tone for the offseason. And in this episode, this offseason priorities list, we're going to go through some priorities. But before we get to the priorities, there are some other dominoes that will take effect and impact some things for the Buffalo Bills. And that first one, if you're watching here on the live stream or on the video, the first domino is the Matt Milano domino. For me, when it comes to the Bills roster and personnel and where we go from here in this offseason, anything and everything starts with Matt Milano in terms of if we bring him back or in terms of if he goes. I think the Bills recognize the importance of Matt Milano. And if you don't recognize the importance of Matt Milano, I feel like it's a small grouping of people, but I've seen not a lot of comments, a decent enough amount of comments on Twitter of, Milano's overrated. AJ Klein can fill Matt Milano's shoes. It's easy to replace him. It is not easy to replace someone of Matt Milano's caliber, especially in today's NFL. He is very strong in coverage. I think a lot of people recognize that and notice that. One of the stats that I really love is from 2018 to 2019. There was only 3 linebackers in the entire NFL who were better in terms of coverage than Matt Milano. One of them was Levante David, who's a perennial All-Pro. Another one during that time was Luke Kuechly. That's the type of caliber of player that Matt Milano is included in when it comes to a linebacker. And he's very strong in coverage. We know that. But as Eric Turner has mentioned multiple times, he's a dog in the box. And the role that he plays, that disruptor role, his ability to time blitzes, his ability to disrupt pulls and disrupt the timing for offenses, in addition to what he does in coverage, but what he does around the box, he creates chaos, he causes havoc, and Tremaine Edmunds benefits a lot from what Matt Milano does. Tremaine Edmunds, for as good as a player as he is, he's a significantly better player when Matt Milano is lined up next to him because of the role that Milano occupies and the type of game and style that he has. And the reason that the Matt Milano domino is, that rhymes a little bit, is really the start for me when it comes to this offseason is because what we see with him and the role that he occupies, if he were to leave, I think if he leaves, I think it's because he gets paid big time on the open market. I think the Bills recognize his value. Bean and McDermott recognize his value, and I think they're going to give him a substantial offer. Whether or not it hits his projected 13.8 average annual value, that's what his projected value is right now. I think the Bills are going to offer him something significant. I think it's going to be lower than that. I would see somewhere between 10 to 12 million a year, most likely somewhere around the 12 or 11, I think, closer. And they're going to be competitive. They're going to try and give him a deal. And as Lone Wolf mentioned here in the chat, Milano will probably get paid handsomely elsewhere. I think Bean signs Williams over Milano. We're going to get to Daryl Williams. I like where your head's at, Lone Wolf. Very good, very good. That's the issue for me, as Lone Wolf just mentioned there. If the Bills don't sign Milano, I think it is due to the Bills being competitive and trying to sign him, but someone just comes with a $13 or $14 million a year offer and they just break the bank to sign him, which makes sense in today's NFL. He is suited to play linebacker in today's NFL, and he's very good in a multitude of ways. So if Milano doesn't come back, I think it's because we either decided to invest money elsewhere or someone just offered him a massive deal on the open market and he took it, which you can't argue with that. Dude's got to get paid and he's worth it, and we understand it. But the reason that's the number one domino is because after, and some of the comments are coming here in the chat, I see a question here from Handsome Man. Can he be replaced in the draft? Comment here from Tito. Milano will be a hard person to replace in the draft. That's the issue with replacing someone like Matt Milano. Other than Levante David, who I mentioned, all-pro linebacker from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Super Bowl champion Levante David. Unless the Bills sign Levante David, there is no player that is a holistic, almost like-for-like replacement for Matt Milano. We could potentially sign some free agents to piece some things together. We could go in kind of a lesser version of Matt Milano. You could go for a KJ Wright or a Jayon Brown or Denzel Perryman, things like that, but you're more piecing and patchworking that position together. And if you go into the draft, as some of you guys have asked and mentioned, there's not a holistic replacement for Matt Milano in this year's draft. I would say Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which is a very fun name to say, he comes closest to replacing Milano. I think he's a little bit better in coverage than Milano was coming out of college, but he's a bit more on the slender side than Milano. He's not as much of a dog in the box as Eric Turner has pointed out, and which he did point out in the Cover One film room that he and I did this week. Go ahead and check that out. And that's a really good point there from Tax. Pretty wild that Milano was a 5th round pick that became so great. Yeah, it's it's really awesome to see the development and the trend that he's been on. And it's tough to get that kind of value. And if you're going, again, into the draft, there's not one holistic replacement. I know a lot of Bills fans like Zaven Collins from Tulsa. He's good, but his coverage numbers are a bit inflated. He represents a decent stopgap to mitigating the loss of Matt Milano. Koromoa would be my ideal replacement. He's a major draft crush of mine. I would love for him to be a Buffalo Bill. I just don't think he's going to fall. And at that point, again, if Matt Milano's gone because of what he does, just individually, but also because of what he does for this defense, this Buffalo Bills defense, a Sean McDermott defense, the linebackers are so tremendously important. We saw it in Carolina. We've seen it so far with McDermott's tenure with the Bills. The linebackers are asked to do so much. And because the base defense for this Buffalo Bills team is a nickel defense, that is what we're in primarily in terms of personnel grouping on defense. Taron Johnson is basically like a linebacker in a lot of sets and formations, even though he's a nickel corner, slot corner. Nickel is our base defense, which means we're running two linebackers a majority of the time. So Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmunds, the two starting linebackers, they're playing roughly 98 to 100% of the snaps. 3 down linebackers, you have to be rangy. You have to get sideline to sideline. You need to be able to drop deep. You need to be able to make open field tackles. You need to be able to blitz. You need to be able to process quickly and accurately. There's a lot of responsibility and stress that is placed on the linebacker position in a Sean McDermott defense. And asking a rookie to come in and fill that right away is a large ask. And again, because Milano has multiple skill sets all combined into one player, he's a tremendous piece for the Bills. And I don't think linebacker wins are a stat, much like I don't think quarterback wins are a stat. Shout out to Bruce Nolan. But we've seen the record and what the Bills look like when Matt Milano's on the field versus when he's off the field. The points per game, the rushing yards allowed per game, the passing yards allowed per game. It's different. It's a different defense when Milano's in there versus when he's not. And if he leaves, that domino is the biggest one for me, because priority one for the Bills this offseason, if Matt Milano leaves, priority one for me automatically shifts to upgrading that linebacker position and filling his spot. What do? Is it done with some patchwork where we have someone who's good in coverage and we piece them together with A.J. Klein potentially, and A.J. Klein is really a first down and at most second down linebacker, or we use a lot of subset packages and sub Klein out with a linebacker who's better in coverage? Do we draft and go with that Buffalo nickel or sign someone to occupy that Buffalo nickel role that we've been talking about for the last several years, and we go with basically kind of like a big nickel or like a dime formation in terms of having almost 6 defensive backs on the field when teams try to spread us out and pass? It opens up a lot of windows that the Bills will have to close, and it opens up a lot of opportunity to fill a spot. And it's all because one guy who does so much, if he leaves, filling his shoes is no easy ask. It is no small task. He's the biggest domino for me. If he goes, priority one has to shift to filling Matt Milano's cleats, which is a very, very tough ask. I want to get to some of the questions here that were asked in relation to this. So Lone Wolf, was it on our linebackers to cover the tight ends last season? If so, it was subpar. So you know what's funny about that is I literally have it in my notes. Eric and I were talking about this offline before we did the film room episode this past week on Koromoa and Tyler Shelvin and Najee Harris, some draft prospects, and we looked at the Bills' blitz percentage this year versus last year, and roughly they blitzed about 5 or 6% more in 2020 than they did 2019, but they had almost the same pressure rate in both years. So the Bills felt it more necessary to bring more pressure, bring more blitzes in 2020, and by extension, they simulated more pressures. They showed more double A gap blitz and then backed out of it, or just showed more pressure in general. And the combination of blitzing more, simulating pressure, combined with Milano being out and Tremaine Edmunds having that shoulder injury, that made us very susceptible to tight ends, especially in the middle of the field, which is where we saw tight ends eat for a lot of the time. And that's another area in which I think a healthy Milano makes a difference. I still wish we could go back to that Chiefs game and see what it would have looked like if we allowed Milano to get a little more physical on Travis Kelce, who ate us alive. But that's a good question there, Lone Wolf. It's not necessarily all on the linebackers to cover the tight end, but the schemes and games that we were running up front to compensate for certain things made us more vulnerable and susceptible to damage from the tight end, especially over the middle of the field. And so I don't want to completely blame it on the linebackers, but the type of game that we were running up front in 2020 made us more susceptible than it had been, especially in comparison to 2019. And even the year before, it was a real problem. Tax, do you think it would be a crusher to switch to 4-3 in today's NFL? Unless you've got really, really athletic 3-down linebackers, I think it's tough to go 4-3 consistently. Unless you're the Sean McDermott Panthers defense and you've got Shaq Thompson, Luke Kuechly, and Thomas Davis. I think that's a large ask to have a team go with a 4-3 as your base, enough to be able to cover in today's spread offense and to be able to line up with teams who are consistently going 11 personnel or 10 personnel or even 12, especially with how some of the tight ends can run now. I think that's a large ask. And if I'm the Bills, especially with how much they like to go nickel, I don't think they switch more to the 4-3 as their regular personnel grouping or formation. And especially if we were to lose Matt Milano, then we have to add 2 linebackers who can fulfill a similar type of role as him. And I think that's a very large ask given the linebacker free agency landscape and with what's coming out in the draft as well. And, I like the comment from Thomas Burke. Jabril Cox, I've heard a lot of good things for Jabril Cox. I haven't made it to him yet when it comes to watching the film this year. I've seen him on broadcast tape, but as Eric Turner loves to point out, you can't go off of just the broadcast tape, so I have to dive into his all-22. I am hearing his name a lot in Twitter circles, in comments on the videos that we've done. I'm excited to get to his tape because I've heard so much hype and good things around him, but that's definitely a possibility as well. And I'm seeing some more comments asking about Tyrel Dodson. That's a large ask to put Milano's role onto the shoulders of somebody who's never handled that weight before. Not saying that he can't do it, but to expect that of him coming into this year and just say, given the amount of snaps and the role that Dodson has played in our defense in prior years, to just put that workload onto his shoulders and assume that there won't be a huge drop, that's a big risk for me. I feel like that's more hopeful than it is being assured that he'll deliver. I still like his potential and what he can do, but I think that would be a large ask of him. If Dodson is going to be the focal point, I think you have to see more rotation with AJ Klein to be in that role and patch it together rather than just holistically rely on Tyrel Dodson or just one person in that role. It's going to be a little tough with that. I'm seeing some comments from Joe. We need star or draft a Tyler Shelvin or some nose tackle. Greg Thompson loves Tyler Shelvin. I'm a fan of his as well. We're going to get to that as we get down to some more offseason priorities, Joe. So I like where your head is at. So that's the Matt Milano domino. I know it led to some offshoots, some tangents here. Also, I'm loving how the chat is starting to blow up. People are commenting, throwing questions. Feel free to do that. I always love to get to any and every comment, question, as many as I physically possibly can get to. I will try and get to. After that Matt Milano domino, the next graphic as I throw up here is the Daryl Williams domino. Someone mentioned it earlier here in the chat in terms of paying Daryl Williams over Matt Milano. Daryl Williams had a very good year in 2020. He was very strong in his pass protection. We saw what he did when matched up against TJ Watt, who was a heavy, I don't want to say favorite, but was heavily involved in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year along with Aaron Donald in 2020. Williams got matched up against him and effectively shut him down. TJ Watt had a tremendous year. He was tied for the league in pass rush win rate amongst rushers, which is a tremendous thing for him. He's dynamic, he's versatile, he's fast, he's strong, he's heady, he's smart. Daryl Williams took care of him in that game against Pittsburgh, and that's just one example. He was very strong in his pass pro. I think he does have some deficiencies in his run blocking, but he's still above average. He had the most snaps among the entire offensive line for the Bills in 2020. He had the best pass block grade for the Bills in 2020. He was third in run block grade, but he was only 1 to 2 points behind players that were in second and first. He allowed only 29 pressures in 19 games. He was a midseason All-Pro pick by some publications. Daryl Williams had a very good year. My bigger thing with having Daryl Williams as this second domino is, for all intents and purposes now, as much as I love defense, I'm a defense guy. This Bills team is a Josh Allen team. It is a passing team. It is a spread offense. Josh Allen is the franchise. He is the guy. You've got to protect the franchise. You've got to protect the guy. And although there were some struggles on the interior of the offensive line in 2020, which we're going to get to, the tackle positions were very much a strength and very much a pillar of this offensive line. Deion Dawkins at left tackle, Daryl Williams at right tackle, also Mitch Morse in the center, who I think is very underrated and is still a very good center, especially in his pass protection. You've got those pillars on the outside. And I don't like to use one game as the end-all, be-all, but if you watch the Super Bowl, the Chiefs, with their backup offensive tackles, you saw what happens when your tackles are unable to withstand just basic one-on-one pass rushers. You saw, as much as I'm assuming a lot of us don't like the Chiefs and don't like Patrick Mahomes, Mahomes is fantastic. The Chiefs' offense is fantastic. And for as good as the coverage was on the back end by the Buccaneers, which it was, they played that too high over 80% of the time. Their speed and athleticism allowed them to cover Kansas City and cause problems for them in coverage. But the Chiefs' offensive line was not able to withstand the Buccaneers' front. And Mahomes had pressure almost as soon as the ball touched his hands. We saw in the most recent memory of a football game being played in that Super Bowl this past weekend, we saw what it looks like when your tackle positions aren't able to hold up against NFL talent. And Daryl Williams, if it comes down, Greg and I talked about this in the salary cap special episode, if it comes down to Daryl Williams or Matt Milano, Greg and I are in alignment here. I think Matt Milano is better at his position than Daryl Williams is at his position, but the positional value of Daryl Williams at right tackle trumps the need for linebacker. As much as that kills me to say, because Milano's my favorite Bill, or one of my favorite Bills, it's close. But the positional value of Daryl Williams is huge. Having a pillar of strength at the right tackle position to be coupled with a pillar of strength at your left tackle position, that's something that can't be understated. It can't be overstated. And especially with a quarterback like Josh Allen, who for as good of a year as he had this past year, he's still growing. He's still getting better. And I recognize this, Joe. Milano is harder to replace this season. I agree. But if we are unable to protect Josh Allen and give him the time that he needs, I think whatever happens on the defense is kind of irrelevant. With the weaponry that the Bills have, with the ability that Josh Allen has, with the trajectory and the trend that Josh Allen has, if we can't do the basic thing of protect him, in addition to supporting the running game, which we're going to get into as well, we don't stand a chance. We're not going to come out here and shut teams down and only give up 10 points. We're not built for that. I don't really think any defense is built for that in today's NFL, but we are built on offense to put up 30 to 40 points a game as we did this past year. And as we saw with the Chiefs, if you can't pass pro, you're in rough shape. We also saw it with the Bills in the playoff game against the Chiefs. We got eaten up by Chris Jones and Frank Clark and that front, and Allen had guys in his face almost every single snap, running for his life, trying to make something out of nothing. And it was tough for him to do anything, almost similar to what Mahomes did. And you saw it all over social media. People were talking about the same thing that happened to Mahomes in the Super Bowl. It's what happened to Allen in the AFC Championship game, but the two quarterbacks were treated differently, yada, yada. Moral of the story is, if you can't protect your guy, your franchise, your QB, you're going to be in rough shape. And I kind of agree that it may be harder to replace Milano holistically, but we got to protect Josh Allen. And there's enough that we can do to kind of mitigate the loss of Milano versus if Josh Allen gets hurt or Josh Allen goes down or we can't do anything to keep him upright and allow him to function, we're not going to function as a team. This is Josh Allen's team. It's a passing team. It's a spread offense. Without Josh Allen clicking, we're not dead in the water, but it's going to be very tough for us to reach the heights and the goals that we want to reach. And Tax had a good point here. Tampa Bay's O-line this year was God tier. They were very good. Tristan Wirfs had a tremendous year for a rookie. Ali Marpet is very good. that line doesn't really get talked about a lot. And obviously, why would it? You got the studs on defense. You've got Tom Brady. You've got the weapons on offense. But the Tampa Bay offensive line was very good. And so, again, this Daryl Williams domino was a large domino because there's a chance, in relation to Milano, there's a chance the Bills can keep both. There's a chance they can keep Daryl Williams and Matt Milano. But I think if one of them stays, the odds of the other leaving are higher. I think Daryl Williams has a good chance to be re-signed. His average annual value projection right now is $7.9 million. I think the only way Daryl Williams leaves is if the Bills have something else lined up in mind in free agency. I don't think they would bank on being able to get a starting caliber right tackle for sure at the end of the first round and being able to plug in for Daryl Williams right away. The only chance I see Williams leaving is if he gets some really good offer somewhere else of like $10, $11, $12 million a year. Maybe someone comes in and gives him like a 3-year, $33 million deal to shore up the right side of their line. I think there's a good chance that Williams comes back. And because I think there's a good chance that Williams comes back, I think that means that there's a higher chance of Matt Milano not coming back. And question from Trill, do you do film breakdowns on your channel? I do some here and there on Disguise Coverage, but the majority of film breakdowns I do are in the film room with Eric Turner that is live on every Tuesday. Oh, and I appreciate you, Joe. Yes, they do the best breakdowns. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And so that Daryl Williams domino is the second biggest one for me in regards to Milano, because if Williams goes, I think that means we kept Milano. But again, we have to address that right tackle position. So whether it's done in free agency or then done in the draft, that's something that has to be addressed. So those are the two biggest dominoes. What happens with Williams? What happens with Milano? And what does it lead us to? I'm also going to throw in there, just because we're in the offensive line talk, John Feliciano. I love his attitude. I love his mentality. Oh, he got eaten up in his pass pro against the Chiefs. We know he's not the best pass blocker. When going into the film room to diagram and diagnose some of the run issues with the Bills in 2020, I saw more struggles in his run blocking than I thought I was going to see. His average annual value that he's projected to get for 2021 is $8.4 million. Unless that AAV significantly drops, I don't see John Feliciano coming back to the Bills, and I wouldn't want to bring him back at that average annual value. I think he's better suited as a depth piece for this offensive line or to be the fifth best offensive lineman. And with the money that he could potentially command, he's going to command too high of a cap hit for us to survive in this nuclear winter of a salary cap time. And I see you coming here with Lone Wolf. Mongo is overrated. I hate saying it. And I see Ron with the comment as well saying no to Feliciano. It hurts my heart a little because I like his attitude. I like his mentality. I like what he brings from a camaraderie and a culture standpoint, but I just don't think the on-field production merits or warrants what he does off the field. And I don't think it warrants the contract that he could potentially command in the offseason here. And comment from Nicholas, he's one of our better run blockers though, right? He was clutch in some of the pin and pulls. He was. But he also struggled in a decent amount of gap scheme runs and missed his spots. And when you hear the comments that Bean makes, like we want the offensive line to be more athletic, I think he's somebody you look at, and he's a mauler, but I don't think he mauls to the point where it compensates or allows you to overlook his lack of athleticism. Although I do again, and as Lone Wolf just threw in the chat there, yeah, you don't win games off the field. I love what he brings from an attitude and mentality standpoint. I think he's going to be too expensive for us to bring back. And that interior of our offensive line, even with him, we didn't have strong interior line play. We didn't have strong guard play all throughout the year, even when Feliciano came back. And he was good in some run aspects, but he was deficient in some as well. And he really struggled in his pass pro. We saw it in that Chiefs game. I don't want to take one game and blow it up and say that that's the standard and this is the only thing we should focus on. But yeah, that Chiefs game, just Chris Jones driving Feliciano back play after play after play is something that is a scary thing to imagine going forward. And we're going to stay on the offensive line with our offseason priorities. And this next one is the graphic show. So this is a high priority. I'm not ranking them in terms of like 1, 2, 3. I'm just ranking them in terms of high, moderate, low. This is really the first priority we're getting into. The first 2 points on Milano and Williams are more the dominoes. So this first priority here is tweaks to the offensive line. And this is a high priority for me. Bean mentioned it, as I mentioned a little while ago, the need to get more athletic up front. I think a bigger thing, again, in diving into the film from 2020, the Bills changed their offensive run scheme in 2020. In 2019, they were decently balanced in terms of zone scheme and gap scheme. For those of you who don't know, gap scheme is more like pulls and powers, things like that, things where you are pulling a guard, you're doing pin and pulls. Zone blocking is more just you're responsible for an area, everybody moves more in unison. There's more specific assignments and reads and a different type of skill set needed for a gap scheme running attack. In 2019, the Bills ran 110 zone, 156 gap. So more gap than zone, but kind of balanced. In 2020, 181 zone, 62 gap. The struggles of the offensive line in the run game, as we saw throughout the entire year and as we saw in the playoffs, were large. So large, in fact, that the Bills and Brian Daboll shifted their offensive philosophy and ran zone scheme way more, over double the amount, almost triple basically, the amount of gap schemes that they ran in 2020, which is way off kilter versus what they wanted to do in 2019 and versus what they did. And a lot of that was because of the struggles and the deficiencies up front with the offensive line. So the tweaks that we need to see, getting more athletic, being able to execute multiple schemes, especially coming out of pass protection. We saw with the Bills, their passing offense is tremendous. Their ability to see light boxes and spread teams out. They just weren't able to take advantage of those light boxes, which they're going to see. It should be easy to run if you are the Buffalo Bills. With Allen and Diggs and Beasley and the rest of the weaponry and the rest of that offensive core, defenses have to honor that. They're not going to be able to stack the box because they're going to be fearful of getting beat over the top or getting beat on the outside. With that, you need to be able to take advantage when defenses are unable to commit to your run and unable to commit to the box. And we didn't see that in 2020. And if we did, it wasn't nearly enough. And again, the offensive line tweaks aren't in just relation to the run. We have to be strong in pass pro. That's where the John Feliciano debate comes in terms of bringing him back. Whether we bring him back at his anticipated average annual value or not, bringing him back, period, is an interesting conversation to have because of his struggles in pass pro. And the Buffalo Bills cannot lose games because Josh doesn't have time to make his reads against a four-man rush. With the weaponry, again, with the weaponry that the Bills have, with Josh Allen's ascension to one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And again, he should continue to go higher. It's just a matter of how much. It's just a matter of if he continues to trend on a sharp incline or if he starts to plateau a little bit. But he will continue to get better, especially in the mental aspect of the game. He improved a lot in that regard in year 3. He should continue to get even better. We cannot afford to lose games because Josh doesn't have time to throw against a four-man rush like he did against the Kansas City Chiefs. We cannot afford to fail to sustain drives because we can't convert a 3rd and 1, like what happened multiple times against the Indianapolis Colts. We cannot afford to be beaten in certain areas on our offensive line against light boxes, against light rushes, against basic structures and schemes up front. We can't do that. We have to protect the franchise. We have to be more impactful in the run game, and we have to be more athletic, like Brandon Beane said. Again, those gap scheme and zone run scheme differences in 2020 are a massive thing. The Bills like balance, and I think they were going to come into 2020 being a passing team anyway, but the fact that they went away from gap runs almost completely, especially the back half of the year, they were a zone running team. That's not something they wanted to do. That's not something they had pinpointed coming into 2020, but they had to shift to that because they weren't executing up front. That interior of the line is the biggest area where I think we need tweaks, especially if we bring back Daryl Williams. Cody Ford, I saw the couple of comments coming in earlier on thoughts on Cody Ford. I think you still need to give him one more year. I think he's a better guard than he is a tackle, and we didn't get to see what a full year of Cody Ford looks like because he went down with injury. You still got to see what you have. I don't want to go through like a sunk cost fallacy type of thing. Like, well, we spent, a day 2 pick on him, so he's got to get some time. We got to get value out of it. I don't think it's a measure of that, but we haven't seen his full capability. I don't think we have enough sample size of him at the position. I think he's probably going to see a starting spot at one of the guard positions coming into this year. And then you're looking at Dawkins, you're looking at Ford, you're looking at Morris. That means you really got to go with a guard in round 1 or potentially a day 1 or day 2 pick. Hopefully you're bringing back Daryl Williams. If not, you got to go and strengthen that offensive line and tweak the offensive line. I'm seeing a lot of the chat coming through, and I like this comment from Ron. My dream draft would be round 1, Tevin Jenkins, who's a right tackle, round 2. Oh, I like the defensive end from Vandy. And Tyler Shelvin, if he lasted to round 3 and we could get him in round 3, I would be so happy. But I really wanted to highlight your round 1 suggestion there with Tevin Jenkins, the right tackle from Oklahoma State. There are some quality tackles in this draft. There's some quality guards as well. Wyatt Davis is a name you're going to see a lot. There are some opportunities to get more athletic and get more structure out of our guard play or even tackle position if we had to go that route. But the offensive line tweak is a high priority for the team this year because as much as we've seen talk about the running backs, and I know Singletary and Moss didn't have the best of years in 2020, but they also weren't set up for success in a lot of ways. The offensive line did not execute up front, and we need to get better at that offensive line. We need to get more athletic. We need to be able to handle a variety of schemes up front. We can't be so deficient in one area that we're like, okay, we have to scrap all the gap runs because we need to go zone now because our guys up front can't handle running gap. We can't be in a position like that. The offensive line needs to be tweaked. We have to be able to protect Josh consistently against 4-man rushes, not let him have pressure in his face as soon as the ball touches his hand in a shotgun snap. We need to be able to execute on 3rd and 1s and short yardage. We need to be able to run the ball enough that it's a threat to teams. We need to be able to run the ball when teams know that we're going to run the ball, and right now we are not at that spot. So the offensive line needs to be tweaked, and we need to see some upgrades in that area. And moving on to the next topic, which I know I've seen some comments come through already. We need a stronger edge presence / pass rush going into 2021. And I'm going to answer this comment quick from Taylor. Can we afford to start a rookie at right tackle next to Feliciano or Ford? I don't feel comfortable starting a rookie right tackle next to Feliciano at guard there. If Daryl Williams is gone, I think that means we sink money somewhere into a guard in free agency, even if that's Brandon Scherf. That would be awesome if he's coming from Washington, but he's going to be a little bit high priced. I really don't think they let Daryl Williams go. I think there's a very, very, very high probability that he comes back, and then you're slotting some other cost-efficient but serviceable guard, or you're drafting a guard to go there at right. I don't know. I don't really see Feliciano coming back, especially at that average annual value. Maybe he comes back on a real cheapy type of deal and they still invest in that position in the draft, but we need to see some tweaks and go through there as well. And as we go through, again, next year in the offseason priorities, stronger edge presence / pass rush. This is a high priority for me. Not overall because of what we have now. And I don't want to discourage anyone from the pass rush that we did have in 2020 because it was there in some spurts. We got some pressures. Jerry Hughes had a phenomenal year. He was tied for first in pass rush win rate in 2020 along with TJ Watt. The problem with that is Jerry Hughes was our best pass rusher, which is awesome. I love Jerry Hughes, but at this point in his career, Jerry Hughes week in and week out should not be the best pass rusher on the Buffalo Bills. He's still very good, but he shouldn't be the best guy. The Bills need a stronger edge presence going into 2021. And someone who can take some of the burden off Jerry Hughes, allow him to rotate more, allow him to see less snaps, and be able to effectively play on first down and second down. It's tough for guys to be a 3-down lineman in Sean McDermott's defense, to be able to set the edge consistently against the run and then also rush the passer, because that's the bigger part here with the Bills pass rush. In a Sean McDermott defense, ideally, he just wants to rush 4 and drop 7. So you're running pressure games and schemes and stunts up front with your front four trying to get to the quarterback. But then also within that, you need to be able to rotate. So your starting four, you don't just need like a starting quality front four. You need like a quality front like 6 or front 7. You need a good like 7 guys that you can rotate along the defensive line who offer you quality, who offer you ability, who when you start to rotate, you don't have a massive drop-off in talent. You don't have a big drop-off in terms of production. And when I say a stronger edge presence or pass rush in 2021, it doesn't necessarily have to be one person. I know a lot of people like to throw out Shaq Barrett because he's going to be a free agent from Tampa. And man, if the Bills could get Shaq Barrett, that would be great. That would be cool. And if we're able to save some money in some areas and give it to Shaq Barrett, that'd be cool. But we don't necessarily need to break the bank on an edge rusher. But if we could add somebody even in a situational pass rush role, or maybe we see what contracts look like for Carl Lawson or Bud Dupree. But again, it doesn't have to be a holistic break the bank, get a stud coming off the edge, but it needs to be somebody who can win in one-on-one situations. We need a pass rusher, especially on third down, who we can put on the edge, and we don't have to worry about, okay, do we need to play some kind of game to allow us to get some pressure? We need somebody that we can just set up on the edge and be like, okay, we have confidence that there's a pretty good chance you're going to beat the guy you're lined up in front of and then go after and then get to the quarterback. That's what we need. I mentioned that blitz percentage earlier when talking about why we struggled against the tight ends. We blitzed more in 2020, and we didn't see better effectiveness in terms of our pressure rate, and it left us vulnerable to certain plays over the middle, especially to the tight ends. This defense is not built for consistently blitzing. This Bills defense is not the Baltimore Ravens organized chaos defense. This defense is not the Dick LeBeau zone blitz Steelers defense. This defense is, I don't mean this in a negative way, but this defense is pretty simplistic. They're going to rush 4. They're going to drop 7. They're going to disguise some coverages, pun. They're going to play games up front with their pass rush and their front 4 and run schemes and stunts and different types of things. And they're going to show different looks, and they're going to operate out of that. But this is not a large zone blitzing team. This is not a team that is going to come after you 40, 50% of the time, at least not ideally. They don't want to do that. So we need a stronger edge presence and a pass rush. I don't think that's anything that is wild. I see some comments coming through. I think the Watt aspect, especially with his contract, is rough to make work in a trade. If he gets cut and goes to free agency, who knows? There's a chance, but I think all the signs point to him, if he's a free agent, point to him going to Pittsburgh to join his brother. The opportunity to play with his brother combined with being able to play in that defense, I think is more likely to take a potential pay cut to go to that team, play with his brother, do all those types of things. And there's a chance we could get Watt, but I wouldn't hang your hat on it. And I know there's people clamoring for Barrett or Yannick Ngakoue or even Bud Dupree. You can see what that contract looks like. But there's some quality pass rushers. We don't necessarily need a massive break-the-bank stud. And this is a great point here from Dylan. I want a guy with guaranteed production who's proven he can excel off the edge. That is exactly what we need. And it can be just a situational guy, but somebody who you know can be a terror. And it doesn't have to be sacks. I know we get caught up in that. I'll be like, well, how many sacks does he have? It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It just needs to be somebody who wins in his pass rush, who affects the quarterback, who can get to him in roughly 2.5 seconds, alter the throw, make him rush his throw, especially with the talent that we have in the secondary, taking advantage of that. That's what we need. We need a stronger presence when it comes to that. And Jerry Hughes, bless his soul, it's not right to continue to put that burden onto Jerry Hughes and say, okay, like, you need to keep being our best pass rusher. You need to keep being our best pass rusher, especially with how he functions on first and second down and is constantly setting the edge and affecting things in the running game. He's not built for that life, unfortunately, to use that kind of comment there. And I wanted to pull up, here's a comment here from Cheeto. We're simply too slow and unathletic. And I don't know necessarily what you meant that in reference towards, just because I'm trying to catch up here in the chat. But I wanted to mention that because it leads into my next point of what I would like to see in the offseason. This priority is speed and athleticism on the defense. The Bills' defense they're a good defense, despite the deficiencies and things they had in 2020. But they are a good defense because of technique, because of execution, because of schemability, and because of coaching. But they're still a good defense. But they are not holistically, physically gifted. They're not tremendously big. They're not overly fast. They don't have certain physical characteristics to be able to hang with certain teams. And I see the comment here, speed and power. Yeah, that's the point here. Tre'Davious White is a perfect microcosm of the Buffalo Bills defense. He's got tremendous technique. He's got great footwork. His hand technique and hand placement and hand usage are great. His hip fluidity and his ability to turn and read routes, his ability to diagnose the play, to have play recognition, to read his receiver, function in the zone, his intelligence, they're all top-notch. But Tre'Davious White isn't out here with a 98 Madden speed. He's not a big, physical, imposing monster. He's quicker than he is fast. He doesn't have the best long-distance speed. He's not overly tall. He's not overly strong. None of those things. And the Bills' defense is like that as a whole. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, I think, are arguably, if not the best safety tandem in the NFL. Neither are the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. They're both versatile. They're both smart. They both execute well. They both play with good technique and intelligence. But again, they don't have tremendous physical attributes. If we look at corner number 2, Levi Wallace, same thing. He's done great for an undrafted free agent coming out of college. And even the people who want Dane Jackson to be corner number 2, not a burner either. Dane Jackson isn't the fastest. He's physical. He's good coming forward, but he's not the most fleet of foot. He's got good footwork, but he's not a burner. He's not tremendously fast. And again, when you're trying to hang with the Kansas City Chiefs, at a certain point, you need speed or some strength, especially in the speed department. If we look at, again, I don't want to take one game or one play and use it to define everything and then revamp everything and rechange everything off of it. But the Tyreek Hill 70-yard reception in the AFC Championship, he caught a pass over the middle and was just so much faster and more athletic and more agile than almost everyone on our entire defense that he took a little, 10-yard over and took it for 70 yards just by stopping and turning and running and acceleration and deceleration and changing gears because he's so much faster. Granted, he's also arguably one of the fastest players in the league, but we saw what the Buccaneers did to Kansas City in playing that too-high scheme and using their speed and athleticism and coverage to cause problems along with their pass rush. It's always a combined effort. You need good pressure. You need good coverage on the back end. If you have one holistically and don't have the other in any form, you're going to be vulnerable. But you need to be able to have a little bit more speed and athleticism on that defense. The only thing that's tough about this one, so this is a high priority for me as well. The only thing that's tough about this is it's hard to address as a whole without overhauling the entire unit. Again, this Bills defense as a whole, other than Tremaine Edmonds, and I'm going with players who I know are coming back next year, so I'm not going to say Matt Milano, but other than Tremaine Edmonds, other than Ed Oliver, we don't really have overly athletic or fast guys for their position on this defense. We have guys that are quicker than they are fast. We have guys that play with good technique. And I see some of the comments coming through that technique and smarts are better at certain positions. And I agree that you need technique, you need execution, you need the intelligence. But at the same time, we got to be able to add some speed, inject a little bit into that defense. But again, what's hard with that is it's hard to do it at the starting positions unless you're completely revamping things. But we need to be able to inject a little bit of it. I like what AJ Epinesa brings. I wanted to mention this in terms of the strong edge presence. The way he came on towards the back half of the year, his ability to use that long arm and get underneath the shoulder pads of offensive tackles and cause some havoc. He had a strong end to 2020. He flashed really well in that Cardinals game, and then he left early due to injury. And ever since that game, when he came back, he was good towards the back end of the year. Now that he gets a full offseason under his belt, hopefully, knock on wood, now that he gets a whole offseason under his belt, hopefully we see him take a large leap in 2021 and seeing what he can do. He also factors into that speed and athleticism piece on defense. I love the dedication that he showed by dropping weight and adding more speed and agility to his game. He's someone that can help in two areas of priority for this offseason in terms of the strong edge presence and pass rush, but also in terms of the speed and athleticism on defense. We need more players like that, whether even if it's just in subsets or backup roles or who we're drafting and who we're grabbing in free agency to fill in different pieces. We need that speed. We need that athleticism on defense because we've seen when we come up against faster or athletic offenses or even bigger offenses, we've been bullied a little bit by some physical teams, and we've been just outgunned when it comes to speed in a variety of ways. And that's a high priority for me. This next priority is a moderate one, but it's one that's being talked about a lot. We need some mismatch opportunities from our running back position. Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, NFL draft, quote-unquote gurus, they have both in their initial mock drafts pegged us as taking Najee Harris, the running back from Alabama, with our first-round pick at pick number 30. I don't think we necessarily need a round one running back in order to get better at the running back position. I know Singletary and Moss, again, I mentioned earlier, didn't have the best of seasons, but I don't think they were set up for a tremendous amount of success given what the offensive line was able to do up front, especially in the running game. But what I would like to see, again, as highlighted here in this segment, is the mismatch opportunity from the running backs. James White, Jamal Williams, even Mike Davis from Carolina, a running back added to the backfield that you can line up out wide or that you can line up in the slot, and it's by design. It's not just to motion somebody out there and see what the defense is doing. It's not just to put someone out there for the sake of spreading the defense out. Give the Bills somebody who you know can win if they get matched up against a linebacker. Give me somebody who can run those arrow routes or those Texas routes out of the backfield, who can run speed outs, who have good hands, who understand spatial awareness and can function in the passing game. Give Josh another mismatch opportunity. Easy routes. We've seen so many quarterbacks throughout the years. I'll just pick the two most readily available ones in low-hanging fruit. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have been so successful in their careers just by dumping it off to the running back for 4, 5, 6 yards, or dumping it off to the running back and letting him outrun the linebacker covering him for a first down. They're easy yards. It's another added dynamic that defenses have to account for. And it's a nice piece, especially if we can add somebody with a little bit of speed as well, to have some more house potential when it comes to the running back position. I like Singletary. I like Moss. I won't say they're the same, but they are similar to one another. Moss has a bit more power. Singletary has a little bit more wiggle, but neither of them are really 5 yards in a cloud of dust type guys. I'm not saying we have to grab somebody that's pure speed, but somebody that offers a different dynamic, whether it's a burner who has that house capability, or preferably somebody who can run routes out of the backfield, who can line up in the slot and create mismatches. James White, Danny Woodhead type of running back. Jamal Williams from Green Bay. Again, I really like what Mike Davis did in Carolina, and if anybody plays fantasy football and had him while he filled in for Christian McCaffrey, he had a really strong year. Guys who can win. Again, it's mismatches. It's being able to bring a guy in and have personnel groupings and packages that you don't have to use all the time, but when you use them, they are effective because they create mismatches and make things easier for your quarterback. And anything we can do to make Josh Allen's life easier, I am all on board for. Again, that's a moderate thing. It's not as high as the offensive line tweaks or the stronger edge presence in the pass rush. It's not on the same level. And then not on the same level as the speed and athleticism on defense, but it's moderate. Another moderate, one more that we want to get through here, is consistency and production from the tight end spot. I like Dawson Knox. I like him a lot, and I fully recognize that he is still raw, and I'm not saying he's done. I'm not saying I'm out on him as a prospect and as a player, but I think relying on him to be our tight end one in 2021 is more hopeful than it is based in expectation in terms of knowing what you're getting and being assured in the production level that you are going to get. In the salary cap special that Greg and I did last week, Greg spoke about how his number one ad for the offseason, if he could pick one, was Jonnu Smith. That's a really intriguing option. Gerald Everett from the Rams is another potential option. I don't think Hunter Henry is realistic because of the money that he is going to command. And there's options. There's also some options in the tight end. Kyle Pitts is not going to fall, which would have been really cool. Brevin Jordan from Miami is pretty sweet. There are some other options, but the only thing with that, with drafting a rookie tight end, even guys that are really loaded coming out of college like TJ Hawkinson, it's tough to be consistent as a tight end in the NFL in your rookie year, just with what's asked of you in the passing game, but also in the run block game. It's tough to take a rookie and plug him in and be like, okay, this dude is going to be sweet. But based on what we've seen so far, I think Dawson Knox is better suited for a tight end 2 role. And therefore, I'd like us to bring in somebody at tight end 1, someone who can be more consistent, who can allow us to have multiple or different personnel groupings, to be able to run a little bit more 12 personnel, which would help in the run game a little bit, but also potentially that could create some mismatches in the play action game and in the passing game as well, in different formations and groupings. It's not a big need, and this is why it is my last one. It's moderate, but it would be nice to not – I feel bad saying it, but Dawson Knox, I'm not holistically confident in him being the tight end 1 for this next year. And comment from Joe there, Knox is the best option with the price. Yeah, but at a certain point, and I'm seeing another comment here that ties in with this from Lone Wolf, how much production does this offense need out of the tight end group? I don't think there's a quantitative amount, but I think with the receiver grouping the Bills have, with having Stephon Diggs and then having Cole Beasley in the slot and having John Brown, or even if John Brown goes and it's Gabriel Davis or Isaiah Hodgins or Isaiah McKenzie, one of those things, those receiver weapons create mismatches. Having a tight end to also create those mismatches, take advantage of those mismatches. I don't care if the tight end only gets 3 targets a game or 30 targets a game. Having someone that creates mismatches that you know will be consistent in their ability to take advantage of the mismatches, that's what I'm looking for out of the tight end position. It's similar to the running game aspect. The Bills' run game needs to be better. But to be better, I don't think that means we need to run the ball 20 times a game. We only might need to run it 8 to 12 times, but when we run it, we need to be effective. When we pass to the tight end or we have schemes where the tight end can take advantage, we need the tight end to take advantage. Dawson Knox's raw ability and physical measurables are tremendous. I just don't have faith that play in and play out he's going to deliver, even if we're just taking from the most basic aspect of catching the ball. I don't have the most faith that he's going to deliver play in and play out. And so it's not – that's why, again, it's not towards the top of my list when it's like we need to get better at the tight end. We need to get better at the tight end. But if we have somebody – and that there's a good point there from Ron, it puts pressure on opposing defenses having another threat at tight end. If we have another piece that defenses have to account for and have to acknowledge, I think Dawson Knox, when we get him the ball, was more just like, oh, okay. Or like the defense will be like, all right, we got beat. Let's just come back and get after it again. But they weren't like, okay, where's Diggs? All right, where's Beasley? All right, where's Dawson Knox? I don't think defenses were doing that. And if we can add a piece to the tight end grouping that they're like, okay, where's Diggs? Where's Beasley? Where's Jonnu? All right, got him. Or even Gerald Everett, someone that's more effective in that passing game. What's nice about Jonnu is his ability to function in the run game as well. Playing in Tennessee, he's seen a lot of run blocking. And Dawson's not a horrible run blocker. But being able to have someone like that can wear multiple hats and create mismatches and functionality. And there's a point there from Handsome Man. Defense has no worry about our tight ends. Imagine if tight end was a threat. And it's coming from Joe. Some of it may be schematic. Tight end is not a priority in the game plan. That's fair. But then you can also, there's the comment from Ron, they never game plan for our tight ends. You can play that both sides, Joe. Maybe the tight end isn't a priority in the game plan, but maybe they're not making it a priority in the game plan because they don't have faith in terms of what results it'll yield and what their return on investment will be in giving priority to that position grouping. And those two moderate ones are very related for me in terms of the tight end and in terms of the running back grouping. I don't think we need holistic upgrades. I don't think, and also just from a money perspective, but I don't think we're going to go out and sign Hunter Henry. I don't think we're going to go out and sign Aaron Jones, but I also don't think we need to do those things. And I saw a comment earlier, apologies for whoever mentioned it, and I didn't pull it up. I know with the running aspect, if you bring in another running back, then it's like, okay, another running back by committee, and then you're dressing 3 running backs and types like that. I'm not a fan of that either. I would like a holistic, albeit one person type thing. I really like Najee Harris from Alabama. I really like Travis Etienne from Clemson. My problem is with, I think, what the holes and needs and upgrades and tweaks the Bills are going to have to make in the draft, I don't think they have the luxury of going running back in round 1 or early round 2, which is where you'd have to go to get one of those guys, unless you're going with Jabril Williams from UNC. And there's some other guys, but then you're still investing in that way. Somehow, some shape or form, the running back grouping has to be upgraded a little bit to add another dynamic weapon out of the backfield to be able to create more mismatches. Or even if we address one of those, I would be okay, whether it's tight end or running back. But both of those are secondary to the high priority of upgrading the offensive line and seeing those offensive line tweaks, getting a more effective pass rush and having a stronger edge presence and more consistency out of that position. And then adding a little bit more of speed and athleticism on defense to be able to contend with the Chiefs and be able to contend with the bigger guys. And I don't mean physically bigger. I mean the bigger teams in the league who have the ability to spread you out. And, I mean, if we happen to play Green Bay in the Super Bowl or something like that, knowing that they're rolling Devontae Adams and Valdez-Scantling and – well, probably not Aaron Jones now. Aaron Jones or Williams is coming back, but they've got so many pieces on that offense that they can roll out and spread you out, and they're bigger, but they've got speed and they've got technique combined with that speed. And again, even if we just stay in the AFC with the Chiefs, we're sitting there looking at a team that is built to run and built to outgun you and get downfield or take, a 2-yard catch and pass and run it for 15 to 70 yards. We need to get a little faster and more athletic on that side of the ball as well. And as we start to wind down here in this episode of Disguise Coverage, and I'm going to throw up the Toodles You Guys banner as we start to do the outro. It's one of my favorite parts of this episode. And so if anybody has any last minute comments, questions, thoughts, or concerns, and you want to get them in, I'll try to get to everything as much as I can as we start to wind down here. Dylan had a good comment. Speaking of Green Bay, if Tanyan doesn't want to stay in Green Bay, he might be an interesting option. That would be an interesting option. Robert Tanyan, he had a tremendous year, granted playing with Aaron Rodgers and being able to function out of the rest of that offense is good. But see, and that's a good example of what Tanyan did in Green Bay. You've got somebody who I don't necessarily think the Packers were coming out and scheming for Tanyan to get open and do things, but he took advantage of the coverage that he received because the defense had to account for Devontae Adams and all the other receiving options for the Packers, and Tanyan was able to take advantage of those mismatches. It would be nice if the Bills could do that with consistency as well because they've got Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, guys that defenses have to account for. Comment here from Luke Ryan. Sign Marlon Mack. I wonder how much money he is going to command. But I like Marlon Mack. A little bit of an injury concern, but it would be nice if he's sharing the load. You don't have to worry about that physical breakdown and toll on his body if he's splitting that workload. He does offer a home run ability and a better receiving option, I think, than most Singletary and Moss. That's an interesting thought. It's interesting to see what kind of cap hit he's going to command and contract he's going to command. Lone Wolf, Chris Carson, probably too much money. Probably too much money, but it has gone in my head. I've had Chris Carson on my fantasy team the last 3 years. I love the way he runs. I love his mentality. I love his physicality. I also think he's a better receiving back than he gets credit for because his physicality is so pronounced, but he's an interesting option as well, but I think he's going to get paid somewhere. He's probably going to be out of our price range to be able to go with something like that. But I like where your head's at. Comment from Ron. I could see Bean going after Kyle Rudolph. Not sure what's left in the tank, but he fits the culture. Still might be somewhat of a decent receiving threat. I don't know if – I mean, you could probably get him on a cheapier type of deal, especially with what the market is going to look like with this salary cap. But I don't know how confident I feel with him. I guess if it's him and Knox, I feel it's like both two tight end twos / Rudolph being a little bit more ahead of him, but he's a great blocker, great attitude. He's been through it all, seen a lot. That would be a cool piece. And with the Bills kicking the tires and trying to bring in Greg Olsen last offseason, someone like Kyle Rudolph fits in that mold. So that's a good call there, Ron. Appreciate you, handsome man. Great show. Oh, nice to see you alone. Thank you very much, Ron. Great job, Anthony. I appreciate you. Dylan has a really cool comment here. Damn, it's nice to finally be a place people want to come to. That's a big thing as well. The Bills aren't, with this salary cap, being lower than normal and being in this nuclear winter of an offseason and figuring out where to spend and how to spend, it's nice to know that the Bills won't have to overpay to bring people to Buffalo. We are not in the Mario Williams contract anymore where it's like we have to overpay this guy by a lot to be able to get him to come here. We are now a destination for teams because of our head coach and GM and culture and quarterback and weaponry and ability to score and ability to win and drive excitement. And players feel that in the league. And that's also part of my reasoning in wanting to invest in the offensive line, not just for the sake of Josh Allen, but to continue the aura of this team and the excitement around this team. This team will go where Josh Allen takes them. I fully recognize that defense wins championships and defense wins Super Bowls, but people don't necessarily think of that first when they look at today's NFL. It's a quarterback-driven league. It's an offensive-driven league. People want to see points. And being able to continue that legend of Josh Allen and continuing to build it up, it attracts media attention and it attracts primetime games, but it also attracts other players. You've seen how many Buccaneers that have come out and said how great Tom Brady is. And when he goes into a room, you just feel it. And he's the type of guy that you put him anywhere and he changes everything, so on and so forth. Dudes want to play with guys like that. It's a reason why every veteran who's still got something left in the tank and still has something to offer signs wherever LeBron James is, because they know that's that dude and increases their odds of a championship and the culture and all those types of things. The Bills are starting to build that a little bit in Buffalo, and Josh Allen is at the hub and the center of it. And as we bring the last couple comments through, Ron Beck, if we sign a running back, it will be on the cheap, in my opinion. I agree. I think it would be somebody who's on like a 1 or 2 year deal, average annual value of like 1.5 to 3 million, depending on how it shakes out or how they structure it. And I mentioned this earlier, Ron White from New England could be a running back that would be a good third down back. I would love to have James White on the Buffalo Bills. I would absolutely love it. His route running, his savviness, his intelligence, his spatial recognition and awareness. Oof, that would be really great, and that will be a fun aspect to add. And it's cool to see where the Bills are. And I'm starting to wind down here and saying toodles. I want to thank everybody for riding with me on this episode and being, whether you were here live or you were watch it later on one of the audio-only platforms or the audio version of YouTube or the video, whatever, so on and so forth. Thank you to everyone for riding with me on this episode, and I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for another really engaging chat. I always wish I could get to literally any and every single comment that comes through, but sometimes it's just not possible. But thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining me again on this episode, and it's going to be a fun offseason for the Buffalo Bills now that the offseason is fully in gear. I know there's some scary things in terms of the salary cap and money and who do we lose and who do we keep and what do we do, and it's tough in a lot of ways, but have faith in Brandon Beane. Have faith in Sean McDermott. It's going to be a fun time. There are options. There are a lot of positive things that will come from this offseason. It starts with the salary cap. It starts with the priorities, which I've laid out here on this episode. I hope you guys all stay safe. I hope all your family and friends and loved ones stay safe. I see some people starting to say bye to me in the chat. Bye to you. Appreciate you stopping by. As always, I'm tremendously grateful and appreciative for every single person that watches, listens, engages, follows, reviews, subscribes, anything and everything. Thank you all so much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good Valentine's Day. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.